right. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining this discussion today. I've been looking forward to doing this for, I would say, a few months because I was a big Bernie supporter in 2016, and I still really love and admire Bernie Sanders. And my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, is, there's a lot of Bernie supporters who follow me and who interact on my page. And so this comes up on my Facebook page quite a bit. Should we support Biden? Should we remain Bernie or bust? So it's like a recurring conversation on my Facebook page, and then also on Talk on Main Street, because Talk on Main Street used to be called We Want Bernie Sanders, and it was a Bernie Sanders page in the 2016 primary. And so, and these are very good friends of mine. I would say that I was probably Bernie or bust, or close to being Bernie or bust, for like a good month right after the primary in 2016. So I feel sympathetic to it, but I personally felt very strongly by the time the election rolled around in November that we cannot afford to take that risk, and everyone should be voting for Hillary, especially in battleground states. So that's kind of my background, but I wanted to have a conversation, a serious conversation about Bernie or bust and the reluctance that a lot of Bernie people have to supporting Biden right now, and take that seriously instead of like trying to slap them away or dismiss them or call them irresponsible. That there is a thought behind it, there's strategy behind it, and so I just wanted to have a serious conversation about it. And I invited a bunch of Bernie supporters, but my dear friend Jay in LA, who was big part of the Bernie or bust movement in 2016, agreed to, grace us with his insights about what happened then, like the history of it and what is happening now. But before we do that, can we just do like a quick hello? Like if you guys could just say your name and where you're calling from. And Kenny, if you could say what your elected position is, that would be great. So starting with Kenny.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thank you first, Annabel, for organizing this. I think this is a really good conversation to have, especially since, we're about 5 months out from the election. My name is Kenny Boddye. I am in Northern Virginia, Lake Ridge, Virginia, in Prince William County, and I'm a newly elected supervisor on the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. Bernie-crat, Bernie progressive, and I'm very happy to have this conversation, especially as someone who was a big Bernie supporter the first and second time around, and now who is an elected official who's really looking at how these conversations are affecting our community, both from a high level and also on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia?
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here too. I am in Owensboro, Kentucky. It's Western. I'm a Bernie supporter both times. Not Bernie or bust. My sister is though, but she's actually gone over to Biden now too. So I have lots of friends that are still Bernie or bust, and I'm very empathetic with what they have to say.
Okay, thank you. Teresa?
Hi, everybody. My name is Teresa. I'm from Binghamton, New York. I do a lot of literature and help with the recovery community. And basically, I'm an independent registered with the Working Families Party because that's where I feel most affiliated.
Okay. Thank you. Emmett?
Hi, my name is Emmett Williams. I'm a filmmaker and content creator working with Annabel on many, many things. And I am mainly here to just learn.
Thank you, Emmett. Okay, so Jay, I want to hand it to you. Maybe you could start with a quick intro about yourself, and I'm going to link to your great Medium piece. Go ahead.
Thanks, Annabelle. And it's great. I think we met at the People Summit back in 2016. Yeah, I guess my progressive bona fides are that I started community organizing in 2001. Heavily escalated during the Occupy movement. And during the Occupy movement, it was a big aha moment for a lot of us who saw that outside power without inside power, without an inside outside power, was very easily dismantled. And we also saw what happens when you really truly challenge state power. And so I think it's really important. In my book that's going to be coming out called The Political Revolutionary's Handbook, we talk about the People for Bernie Sanders, which Annabel was a part of. And it was a movement of Occupy organizers. This is incredibly important because it does factor into, there was no connection between People for Bernie and the Bernie or Bust strategy, but in principle, it's part of the same paradigm. And that is, in my opinion, a shift from consumerist politics to an organizer's politics. And I'll get back to what I mean by that. But initially, I don't speak for the Bernie or Bust movement. I did speak at the Bernie or Bust rally at the DNC, but originally there were a few different camps. It was led by someone named Victor Tiffany, and Revolt Against Plutocracy was a group. And my involvement happened when this really brilliant woman, African-American organizer from Philadelphia named Yane Indigo, came into an affinity group that I had organized called Bernie's Avengers. And we were a secret group of Bernie surrogates. We recruited Bernie surrogates and bands to support the campaign. And then we organized that into an affinity group. And it was, a lot of people that you saw stumping for Bernie and a lot of people that you would recognize. And we did stuff all over the country. Number of members of the Democratic Platform Committee. And Yane came into that when she rose to national attention for going on, I can't remember which, it was CNN or NBC, but she just annihilated the host, talking about, they wanted to marginalize the Bernie or Bust into a bunch of, the perception was it was a bunch of rowdy children. And Yane just stunningly dismantled Hillary's record on interventionist wars in Honduras and in Libya. And that's how we met. That's how we were introduced. So we were part of an affinity group that did stuff all over the country. And so she was a kind of a de facto spokesperson for the Bernie or Bust movement. And myself and a few people, one person who I don't think would like to be named, but was a very, very influential member of the party and the progressive movement, and myself, and I brought in some people who are some of the top minds in the music industry. I mean, my friend Angelica Cobb-Baylor, who is no longer with us anymore, she passed away, but she created Katy Perry, like, in a sense. She created her career in a big way. One of the greatest minds in the music industry. And the Bernie or Bust was a tactic which was meant to leverage all of the disaffected Bernie voters and independents and progressives, to leverage that for the superdelegates, because everything we had been told was that there was going to be a floor fight at the convention. So that was part of what Bernie had talked about, said we're going to take it all the way to the convention. And so the history of those superdelegates, as everyone may remember, is that the superdelegates were meant to be the grown-ups in the rooms, so to speak, even though they were largely lobbyists. And we did see that, there were a number of them at the Democratic Platform Committee. And so the idea was to launch a platform, which we had in development for weeks and weeks. We had this incredible strategy. And just as we were about to press go and launch that, was right around the time of the Democratic Platform Committee. Bernie, then we learned through our back channels that Bernie was going to concede and endorse Hillary before the election. Now, because there wasn't, in my opinion, enough of a meaningful connection between the campaign and the grassroots, that was one of the areas where that outside strategy didn't, and it was even more pronounced in 2020, which is why I do believe we lost this time as well, because there wasn't as much. It's important to know there's the campaign and then there's the grassroots movement. And that is incredibly important to make that distinction. And so ultimately, after Bernie endorsed, we went to, I went to Yane and said, look, there's really no strategy anymore to leverage that. I mean, you can collect emails if you want for your own purposes, for your own organizing, but it's really, there's not really much to do after that, because the whole point was to share that it was supposed to be a huge swath of voters and say, if you do not nominate Bernie Sanders, this group of people are going to leave the party. And that was the purpose of it. And what ended up happening was that there was another camp of people who were sort of in the Green Party far left, and they capitalized on that and it became part of the Dem exit around the convention, which was really, kind of the electoral equivalent of getting angry and throwing plates. And, I've organized with Greens since 2001, but in my opinion, it's not a viable strategy. There's no way to really build electoral power through that. And the last thing I wanted to say on this is that, in my opinion, this is all part of a larger paradigm shift that must happen on the left, which is the shift from, and I would say in our country and our world in general, because the climate crisis is coming. It is coming. And if you think the COVID crisis is bad, what awaits us with the climate crisis is much worse. And the fact that we have Joe Biden is really scary. And I'll say a couple things. One, it really matters what state you're in. I know that the burn your busters, the Green Party, this became a trope used by the Democratic establishment to avoid any kind of culpability for, say, not campaigning in Michigan, which probably would have been a good idea. And I break this all down in a 15,000 word autopsy called 27 Reasons That Trump Won That Have Nothing to Do with Susan Sarandon. You can read that. It's the Democratic Party never wrote an autopsy. It just sort of, they shifted into high gear and it was Russia, 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 which largely has been debunked. Like there was some attempts, but it was largely overstated. They took a small truth and they used that to basically justify, to remove culpability from themselves. But ultimately, in my view, what this comes down to is that we must stop thinking about politicians as our favorite brand. That some imaginary market must deliver to us a candidate that aligns perfectly with our worldview. Instead, democracy is about a people's movement. It's about us organizing constituencies and leveraging that power to move policy. Like that has to be the shift, with an outside and an inside strategy, which means outside groups like the Sunrise Movement, like Extinction Rebellion, like Black Lives Matter, lots of our intersectional movements working with inside, like the Progressive Caucus or people who have inside power, and leveraging all of that grassroots power together to move on policy and write policy and elect people. Because ultimately, this consumerism has us reduced to passive observers, and it's part of that technocratic shift that happened, that this book called Listen, Liberal breaks down quite a lot. The technocracy says that we're the grown-ups, we're the grown-ups in the room, you should trust us and just go about your day. And that is shown to be absolutely false, because we've lost 1,100 seats at all levels of government. And I just want to say that I've never been a party member. And the very last thing I'd like to say is that there's also a very false premise that those Green voters, those far left voters, socialists, libertarians, somehow somehow Hillary Clinton or the Democratic Party, like those votes somehow belong to her, which is a completely false premise. Those voters are never going to vote for an establishment candidate. It's just not going to happen. It is as you would never vote for Republican, they are never going to vote for that. So it is a completely false premise that those people are going to vote that way. And the fact that they're running that trope is an absolutely a false premise. And all of this is why I ended up going to work for the Shahid Buttar campaign, because we have to continue to organize around the issues, and show the party bosses, who very much are instruments of the oligarchy, that it's time to build bottom-up power and a people-centered movement. So that's, thanks. Yes, Annabel.
Yeah. I just want you to explain who Shahid is to everybody.
Oh, Shahid Buttar is a constitutional lawyer and professor from Stanford, who is challenging Nancy Pelosi from the left in San Francisco, and that is an opportunity to organize. I mean, he was on the ground in Ferguson. He's been organizing against. He was actually an organizer against the Iraq War, and so he's really an organizer, and it's an organizer's campaign. And quite a lot of the Bernie heavyweights have come on behind the scenes, behind the campaign, and it's really incredible. And I like Shahid. I like Vine, but for me, it was never about Bernie. It was never about these candidates. This is an opportunity to build power, for the progressives to build power, build electoral power, and organize the grassroots around the issues that are important, like Medicare for all, like a Green New Deal, like the movement for Black lives, and all of those other critical issues right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jay. I have so many questions. I want to give everyone a chance to respond. So if you guys could kind of use the chat to let me know if you have a question or raise your hand, that would be great. So the question I have is, if you had been in a battleground state in 2016, would you have voted for Bernie? I mean, written in Bernie, because I know you did that in California, and you have the luxury to do that in California.
I had California privilege. I would say that if I had lived in a battleground state, I would have had to think about it a lot harder. But for me, I just want to point out that there's only 4 million members of the NRA, and the NRA. Everyone knows that the NRA dictates policy for the Republican Party on such a massive level. And so for me, that's really the model, and I would, if I had lived in a battleground state, I would have had to think about it a lot harder, but it's interesting how much, it's like Hillary Clinton was always going to win California by 20 points. It was always going to happen. Joe Biden's going to win California by the same margin. And yet, the voters, there seems to be some impetus to vote shame people, which never works. It just is not going to work. Instead of organizing in your community, organizing your communities to come together, and using that power, building that power. And also, I would increase, say, you better. I mean, instead of trying to vote shame, get on the phone and phone bank for your candidate. Go and knock doors for your candidate. Like that's where it is. It's not going to be vote shaming people online. It's just not going to work. It's actually going to drive them to not support your candidate. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Sort of, yeah. I guess, are you seeing the same kind of movement building right now? That could be called Bernie or bust?
I would say the same. Oh, you mean in terms of that? I'm not really plugged in with the same actors. Haven't seen an active, that tactic being organized. Maybe there is somebody organizing around it. I'm not aware of anyone actively organizing around specifically the Bernie or bust tactic. I think it's a good tactic if it's organized well, but you have to be able to have the level of organization where that constituency is really operating as a voting bloc. Like the NRA, those people will go based on the leadership of that organization, or the Christian right also. The Christian right also does this as well. I'm not aware of any active Bernie or bust organizing. Maybe there is, but I'm certainly not aware of that as a tactic. It's become sort of still a protest cry. And I believe that is still rooted in consumerist politics. I still believe that's rooted in abject consumerism of I'm an individual, and this candidate is not like the most organic brand of kombucha, so I'm not going to support them. And I don't think that is a tenable I don't think that that is tenable. I do know that there was a group of, I want to say Tom Steyer was involved in right around the time of the nomination, or I'm sorry, the time Bernie conceded. Tom Steyer, there was a group of, I'm not sure if it was Sunrise, but they released some demands for Biden. And there was a group that sort of said, look, okay, if you want our votes, this is what you have to take a position on, what Biden has to take a position on. And this is really important because honestly, like, I don't believe that the Democratic establishment really cares about beating Trump. I think that it's about us building people power they will move on the issues if the grassroots, if the people are demanding it. But the problem is we are so atomized as a society into individuals, and just sort of like the Democratic Party loyalists will follow whatever the consultants, whatever trope, whether it's the Bernie bro, the bullshit Bernie bro narrative, or whatever, or Russiagate, whatever it is, people just fall in line with that instead of, thinking thinking in terms of creating solidarity. That it is a bottom-up, people-centered movement instead of a consultant-driven top-down movement. And as long as I vote for a Democrat, I'll be fine, even though, under Obama, they expanded the war theater by 7 countries. The Obama administration built those cages that the kids are in. They deported 3 million undocumented citizens. They exported fracking all over the world. And, and in this internet age, the independents, like 40% of the electorate are independent. They do not identify as party loyalists. There are not enough party loyalists to win a general election. And that's something we should all be concerned about. And in my mind, that's the reason we all need to come together and organize these constituencies and build power. It's about building power, in my opinion.
Okay, Kenny?
Sure. So there's a lot to unpack there. With your question, I mean, I'll say up front, I voted for Hillary in the general election in 2016, even though I'm in Virginia, which was still a relatively safe place for Hillary, especially since Tim Kaine was her running mate. Definitely would have probably pushed in hard to do it in a battleground state. So what I would say about that first is folks really need to go back and look at the defection rate of Hillary primary voters in 2008, and then voted for McCain in 2008 versus the proportionality of the mythical Bernie Trump voters. Because I do know people that went from Bernie to Trump. Let's not dismiss that completely. But there's actually a larger percentage of people that went from Hillary to McCain in 2008 than went from Hillary. Hillary or Bernie to Trump. But it depends on where they are, right? That's the question. Where are these folks who are defecting? Obviously, the battleground states, they have much larger impact when folks defect. But I wanted to first just put out there that there weren't as many people who defected from Hillary in 2016 as defected from Obama in 2008. So that's one. Two, I appreciate Jay's commentary on movement building versus candidate brand, because I think part of the different landscape this time around is our revolution didn't exist in 2016. Justice Democrats didn't really exist in 2016. There are now issues-based wraparound organizations that still carry the same message, by and large, that Bernie championed in 2016 that didn't really exist back then. So it's facilitated a venue and a mechanism for that advocacy that I believe Jay is talking about. I was endorsed by both the Justice Democrats and Our Revolution when I ran last year, and there were frankly establishment Democrats, even elected officials, who called me and had very frank conversations, thinking that it was a liability to be endorsed by those organizations because of the perception that somehow they are too far left, or that they're all about primarying establishment Democrats and also their stuff. But yes, there were maybe 1 or 2 voters out of the entire thousands that participated in the election that told me that was a turnoff. But by and large, there were even more people that said, hey, we know what these organizations stand for. They stand for anti-corruption. They stand for people power. They stand for a new brand of politics whereby you are catering towards kitchen table issues versus who gives you the biggest paychecks when you run for office. And so when we have these conversations about the Bernie or Bust movement, or Occupy, or like I said, Our Revolution, or even the Justice Democrats, it's all about now looking at us as different coalitions of voters versus, like Jay said before, just these atomized individuals who are just sort of acting under their own agenda. Because being an elected official myself, I now realize, even just 6.5 months in, that my priorities from day to day, or from meeting to meeting, or from vote to vote are different than some of the mainstream folks who have a different number one priority. Some folks are very heavily education-driven voters. They really care about schools. They really want us to invest that. Other folks are about social justice and racial justice. And so it's all about, like Jay said, that inside-outside presence. And that's the last thing I'll touch on is back in 2016, in terms of establishment support, I would say 99.9% of elected Democrats either got behind Hillary very vocally or just didn't say anything. And that's because the party apparatus shamed elected officials who did not fall behind the chosen coordinated candidate. And you don't see that nearly as much now that you fast forward to 2020. There's a large number of elected officials, even here in Virginia, that were either not elected in 2016 and became elected in 2017, or were before and were scared, that then were very vocally behind Bernie this time. And that sort of starts to help channel a lot of that frustration and real push to really align with what we should be as a party. The last thing I'll say on that is, as we move down this road and we really think about why folks who were Bernie voters, for example, may have voted for Trump, and Jay touched upon it, that there are these folks that they're not necessarily aligned to party so much as they're aligned with the message and what it says about the state of the system that we're in. And there are folks that frankly won't vote for an established candidate because they are a perpetuation of the status quo of a broken system. Now, to flip that on its head, which has come out of the movement of Black Lives, especially recently, is the system isn't actually broken. It's working exactly as it's intended to, and that's to prop up corporate oligarchy interests that is rooted in classism. And until we start to have more folks who are mainline candidates who speak to that and are willing to say, I have to be elected as part of the system. However, I understand that the system is not working for people because it was never designed to, and we need to change it instead of kicking the ladder down like so many other people do. We'll never have that real fundamental change, and those will not ever be candidates that, the Occupy folks, the far left folks, a lot of the Bernie people will never support them because they perpetuate the system that is already oppressing people. So if we're able to have a holistic conversation with our candidates, with our current elected officials, that you can no longer just say that we're going to make tiny tweaking changes, incrementalizing them here and there, but that the system itself needs to be fundamentally changed because it's not working. That's the only way we'll actually be able to move forward and be a true big tent of the left and of progressivism.
Thank you. Yeah, anybody else who would like to respond to what Jay or Kenny has said? Tanya, Pam, I know you guys have strong opinions about these things. So you can use the chat to raise your hand or just raise your hand. Okay, then I will, Cynthia, I don't know if you have a response or question, but no? Okay, so then I will ask another question. I guess it's not that I disagree exactly with anything that either one of you have said so far. It's just that I do feel like Trump is a singularly, uniquely dangerous person, and that I do feel we need to call upon everyone to help, to come to the aid of American democracy and help remove this danger, because he is kind of like the Katrina of politics, or the COVID of politics, whatever. I mean, he's just uniquely dangerous person. So it's not, I don't feel like it necessarily fits in the same kind of framework of party politics. Like, this is a person that to me threatens our entire democracy, and where there's a clear body count to his incompetence. And so, and if we want to build grassroots power, we have to remove this danger. We're not going to be able to me, do anything, anything that's going to benefit the people, as long as he's in the way, that he's in this kind of position of power with command of our military, and to have the power to appoint Supreme Court justices, and reshape our institutions. And so I agree with the criticisms of the party. I agree with a need for building power for the people. I agree that we need these reforms. I've read Thomas Frank's book. I agree with his analysis of what's gone wrong with the Democratic Party. But I just think that we've got to work together to focus on removing Trump and all his enablers in order for us to make any progress at all. Because I think the arguments that you guys are making would work as long as we have some semblance of a democracy. But like right now, I mean, we're headed in a direction where all that is threatened, in my opinion. So I don't know if you guys want to respond to that, because Pam also has a question. Why don't we go to Pam, and then you guys can respond to both of us. Pam? Pam, did you want to ask a question? You're on mute. You're mute.
Okay,
right
I'm sorry.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I have a question. Well, about the whole concept of it being like from the bottom up versus from the top down. A lot of people who are Bernie or busters, and I have a loved one in that category, or he was. He's not really anymore. Because according to him, a lot of people have turned on Bernie for not going further and fighting harder to stay in it. And he says there was a good percentage of Bernie supporters who wanted him to just stay in and disrupt things as long as possible and make demands and not move on those demands, and think that, that's his one opinion. But he claims that that's a big piece of why a lot of people got really frustrated with Bernie. Like, I'm thinking like right when he conceded. But the question I had was, I don't know if it's necessarily bottom up versus top down when you speak about the Bernie or busters versus the establishment, because one of you, I'm not sure which one, you spoke, I mean, it was verbatim, the argument he gave me. So evidently there's some coordination around message, for the people who support Bernie. It was the exact verbatim argument he gave me. And it sounds like, it's cherry picking, things against Obama, it's the exact same thing, and ignoring the destruction and racism and misogyny and xenophobia of Trump, and even actually go over and vote for somebody like that, and then to justify it by these 5 or 6 talking points that everybody's using. I'm suspicious that that's coordinated too, and it's disruptive. And the problem I had with him, and this is my son I'm talking about, in case you haven't figured it out. I had, because it's like, how comfortable are you in your life that you can just subject me, an older, Black, sicker person, to a system like the one we're living under with Trump? And I mean, if you really care about working people, if you really care about the oppressed, how can you subject me to this? How can you pull us back? When, I mean, of course you can criticize the Democrats. I agree with all of that. And I've been in the movement for probably 40 years now. And I've seen how the incremental stuff is frustrating. But we've never had this opportunity before either. When I was young, like in the 80s, the youth movement was like me, there wasn't many people involved. that were young back then. And now, I mean, we can move the world. So why make it that much harder by pulling back? You know, I mean, we couldn't do anything, or, you know, because we were small, didn't have any power, didn't have a voice, got ignored. I've been at demonstrations. I sing at a lot of demonstrations. I've been at 500,000 people demonstrations that got no coverage in against like when the Iraq War started, for instance, stuff like that. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But it's just, I don't understand how, you know, you can justify. I mean, my biggest issue is like the folks that voted for Trump, for instance, instead of Hillary. Anyway, that's all. Was that a question?
Yeah, I heard a question in there, like how
Okay.
can you justify what Trump has actually done to super vulnerable people, especially older Black people with health issues? And I think that's a very, very, very important question.
Can you just clarify when you say what Trump has done? Can you just clarify specifically what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I mean, forget about like all the criticisms you had against Obama, whoever. I'm saying you, but I don't know if it was you who said it. Double down 3 times as far as Trump's concerned, but not even that. And I don't. I mean, I was like I said, I've been involved in the movement, and for me, even the way you feel waking up each morning is important. Like people. One of my friends trashed Michelle Obama recently. I'm like, okay, she's in power. Yeah, well, how helpful is that? But you know, they just have to make like, I'm gonna be pure and I don't care, you know, yeah, Michelle Obama, yeah, she's Black woman, whatever, you know. But how Obama, Michelle, and Barack made Black people feel was important. So that's something that I wouldn't just dismiss. And versus how somebody like Trump makes you feel, you know, I mean, knowing that a man who, you know, I mean, Lord knows what he would do if he could get away with it to Black people. So for people to argue that they're that Obama was just as bad is ignoring. I mean, that's only one little aspect of it, but you know, it's an important thing to a lot of people. And I mean, I could try to remember. I mean, because I'm on top of the news a lot, and he's done a lot of things. He's revoked a lot of things that were like somewhat progressive, you know, and they're working on things like every day. He's just gutting things that were progressive, little things, but they add up, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. And I think that we're a little bit moving the goalposts because I don't think any of us, you know, I certainly recognize how dangerous Donald Trump is. You know, I think he must be removed. That is the whole purpose behind my premise that we must shift from the consumer's politics to organizers' politics, because on the left, that premise is still very vibrant on the far left. You know, it's like, I want to support Howie Hawkins because he is a brand that more agrees with my worldview. So I would definitely agree with you on that point. And having said that, we're not quite saying the same things. You know, the purism has become also a trope because we're not talking about that. You know, I think when you look at the percentage of African Americans that voted for Obama, you know, and the percentage of voters that voted for Obama and sat out in 2016. Deficit, in my opinion, in empathy amongst Democratic Party loyalists who grew up with free college, who grew up who can afford healthcare, who own their own home, and the vast majority of people who've just come to the conclusion that it does not matter who's in office. Now, it certainly matters if you're undocumented, because it's absolutely clear that Donald Trump has taken that racist rhetoric and taking it to a whole other level. It is no question. There's no question that it has been a clear escalation. I would way prefer to, I think it's crucial that we organize against Biden versus organizing against Trump. In terms of climate change, it's a death sentence. There's nothing we can do to organize against Trump, because ultimately people have gone so far into their own echo chambers. The Democratic Party loyalists, you live in an echo chamber that is curated by social media algorithms. You all listen, the progressives, party loyalists, libertarians, alt-right people, we all live in our own echo chambers. And there is a gap of empathy to understand how other people feel, and how my opinion, having traveled across the country, in every corner of this country, is that poor working people have, half of them have just given up, because whether it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, their life is just not going to change significantly. And I disagree, because I think that climate crisis is coming, and it's time for us to come together, like as if the scary aliens are coming, or the asteroid is coming to Earth. That's the moment we're in. But because of your news choices, like if you're watching CNN or MSNBC, you just live in a different world. Or if you're watching Fox News, you live in a different world. And that is disconnected from poor and working people. And I don't speak for everybody, but I'm just saying that is the trend that I have seen. So those people it makes sense when you say, oh, the Supreme Court, it's logical. I understand, but to people in Flint, Michigan, it doesn't matter, because they still don't have drinking water, and nobody's coming to save them. And nobody came to save them. That's the paradigm shift that I'm talking about. And the impetus is to put the onus on poor people, poor working people, instead of looking at the party officials who have done all the things that I'm talking about. We're not saying that Obama was worse, but if you live in Olivia, the Democratic Party loyalists don't want to look at the receipts. They wanted, I'm sorry, I'm not directing towards someone in particular, but yeah, Annabel, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Sometimes you're freezing up a little bit.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Kenny, what did you want to say?
Yeah, so I wanted to start by thanking you for that commentary, Pam. And I'll start by saying I completely understand what you're talking about when you're talking about how it feels when you have a certain president in office. I'll give a very, very quick story, because I don't want to dominate this too much. But up until Barack Obama was nominated and elected, I didn't think that someone that looked like me or came from my background would ever be able to make a large impact in anyone's life. Barack Obama and I have a very similar background. We're both mixed kids, just flip-flopped. My mom is Black and my dad's white versus the other way around. But other than that, very similar. My dad's family, which is the white side, is from the Midwest. And so that feeling of being and feeling and seeing myself in our elected officials and feeling comfortable in my skin and knowing that I am enough, and my background is enough, and who I am is enough to make substantial change in the world, because I see that the leader of the free world has the same lived experience as me, is important. And so I have that on one hand, but also being disappointed in some of the things that happened during the Obama years. And I don't all fault it on him as an individual, because we know that, especially on that level of government, there's a lot of people that make a lot of decisions around you and advise you. But I'll give you a couple quick examples of parts where that was a tension in me. So his cabinet picks, for example, he ran on hope and change. Obama, the campaigner, it was a lot more progressive both times than Obama, the president. So he picked a lot of Goldman Sachs, Wall Street establishment people to advise him as his cabinet picks. Yes, those people have experience, but they didn't look at the underlying inequities in the system that exists, because they were just still playing by the same rules, to get back to something I said earlier. The other example I'll give is I organized in New Mexico when the Affordable Care Act was being argued in Congress, right after I graduated from college. And to me, it was severely frustrating when we went from this conversation of a public option which would have held a lot more people, a lot more accountable in the health insurance industry, to being completely walked away from. There were people in our coalition of organizing that were single payer only people that were willing to at least interact with us and help us and advocate with us because they saw the public option as a viable alternative to that in some ways. But as soon as Obama and others walked away because they weren't willing to hold other Democrats accountable, we lost a lot of support for things. And so I don't think anyone on here is saying that they're the same, but what, at least from my opinion, there are very many ways in which the Democratic Party is never truly held accountable for how they walk away to very fundamental things, like you said earlier, people that are sick that need healthcare coverage, people that are dying as a result of racism and systemic issues in our culture. It still seems to me like during election time, Democrats are progressive champions that care about all of our intersectional coalition issues. But then once they get elected, they walk back and they allow the Republicans and conservatives to drive a lot of that narrative. And so I think that where we are right now, at least collectively, and a very broad strokes, or at least where I am, is especially this time, it was disappointing with all of the options we had as our nominee for our party. We still chose the large, looming establishment pick when we had a lot of other choices that would have really moved the ball forward in so many ways. And to wrap it back around to what you said, Pam, at the beginning, in terms of your feeling, I would have felt a lot better, even just in an emotional way, to have a Kamala Harris as our nominee. Now, I don't align with Kamala Harris on as many issues as, say, Elizabeth Warren or especially Bernie, but that balance of having that person you feel like, yes, this is an actual statement of where our party has come and our society and all the things that all of us felt when Barack Obama got elected on election night. We had that, and we had a lot of the policy and experience and even establishment support in Kamala Harris, but she didn't get any traction because of how the media portrays things. And don't even let me get me started about how the media portrays things, to get back to something that Jay said, because like you said earlier, Pam, people would organize back in your heyday, 500,000 people would go and protest, but because no one assaulted a police officer or no one destroyed anything, the media never covered it. But we see now with Black Lives Matter, 2 or 3 people throw a brick through a storefront out of 30,000 people who protest, and that's what gets the headline. So it's this whole idea that, unfortunately, until we can also dismantle the influence the media has and how they cover issues, we'll never truly be able to have a society in which we can actually talk about the big ticket issues and have people who are elected that will always align with our values.
Yeah, I just want to interject that I know kind of all of you on this call right now. And I'm pretty confident that we're in agreement about where we want to get to. Like in terms of the actual outcome, I think we're probably all in agreement. I mean, the disagreements are about how to go from point A to point B, right? So we all want to get to that place, but what is feasible? And I guess for some of us, and I'm having had conversations with Pam and Tanya and so forth about this particular issue. I mean, I know that there's just a lot of fear that people are not going to pull together to make sure that Biden gets elected and Democrats win. And then we can work on changing the Democratic Party, but everyone has to commit to that change, instead of keep giving the Democratic Party passes, right? And not holding the Democratic Party accountable. I believe we need to hold the Democratic Party accountable. And I definitely agree that there were so many things that happened during the Obama years that to me were real mistakes that really became impediments. That led, in a way, you could make the argument, and led the way for people's anger and resentment and disappointment to having somebody like Trump sort of fill that vacuum as an outsider. And so I'm with you on just the need to create that change, but I am really scared that we're going to end up with Trump again, really scared. And I think people are getting way too complacent. I think we've just got to focus on it from now until November. And then we could talk. I know this sounds like an excuse, but I really do think we need to have like a real people's convention, not just the Democratic Party convention. I want like a real people's convention, like the kind of Occupy type, assembly type thing, or the People's Summit, like we did for Bernie. I mean, like a summit where you see real people. We need to be able to like actually have these meetings and give people a chance to be heard, give people a chance to learn and to think together and to really kind of come together in a very creative way, to kind of reset our democracy. Right, to me, like the biggest issue I see in our politics has to do with passivity. I mean, you're calling it consumerism, but like there's a lot of passivity, people just kind of waiting for like, you know, menus and services, instead of realizing like, no, we got to roll up our sleeves, we got to do the work, and we cannot be passive. And the work that needs to be done, in my opinion, right now is that we've got to figure out how to remove this person. We need to hold the Republican Party accountable and get the Democrats to understand how aggrieved we feel and how incrementalism has failed us. You know, that we've got to make some big changes, right? I think we can do all those things. I just want all of us to not lose sight of the fact that first we got to remove Trump. So that's just kind of where what my take is.
Sure.
Jay, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, unless I'll defer to Kenny if he wants to.
Yeah, actually,
Let's
before
weigh
we
in on it.
talk, I see that Pam said that she wanted to answer, so I wanted to
Oh,
just.
okay, yeah, Pam. Do you
No,
want
I agree with everybody. but I think like I most agree with the fear part, you know, about Trump getting in there again. What does that say about us as a country? Oh, and somebody had mentioned, there were so many points made, but I'm not a Democrat. Like I'm one of the folks who since 17 has been out in the broader left movement. And that was the whole thing. I raised my kids in the movement. My son is also biracial. I'm the Black one. But so, you know, yeah, but that's how scary it is. I mean, I've always, and he was like a little bit disappointed in me because I actually went to New Hampshire to work for Obama in 2012. And because I was starting to have the same feeling then, like we've been out in the wilderness fighting on the left for a long time. I mean, people say, well, it hasn't worked to work inside the Democratic Party and get the incremental advances. We've been out in the movement for 50, 60, maybe 80 years now, actually. And we've been getting our asses handed to us, you know. We won on Mandela. I mean, it's like on one hand, I can tell you what the movement's won, you know. And so that's one thing I wanted to clear up about, you know, my outlook, as I'm not a run-of-the-mill, whatever the party leadership tells me to type Democrat. I'm a leftist, but I just, I'm afraid of where this is going, you know, because before everybody's, oh no, like my own mom, you know, one election, I said, oh, well, if you don't vote for this guy, you may lose your Social Security. That was Bush, because that's what he ran on. And she was like, oh, girl, nobody's going to take my Social Security. You know, people just don't believe it can get that bad. But yeah, I think it can. So that was the only thing. Yeah, I'm not a run-of-the-mill Democrat. I don't think. Not yet.
Yeah.
No.
No, I appreciate that. And so, no, and Jay, I'll give you in a second once I just wanted to put out there. I appreciate that, Pam. Thank you for clarifying that. And I think it's important context. To go back to the fear, and I completely get that. Obviously, we do need to make sure people understand, especially now that Trump has an actual record to run on, right? Before in 2016, it was all theoretical. What could he do based on his rhetoric? And, you know, he's made good on all the racist, xenophobic, truly damaging things, and has sometimes turned it up even more than a lot of people thought possible. So that's still a component that we still need to run against him as, since he is an incumbent. But at the same time, at least from where I was coming from, especially in 2016, we had a lot of people, to something that Jay mentioned earlier, which was vote shaming people. Like, how dare you even consider not voting for Hillary because, you know, if you don't, X, Y, and Z will happen. And to me, that's, you can have an element of this is the opposition, what they're doing, but if that's all you offer, that's just a prescription for someone to not vote at all, or for them to vote green or vote or just vote against Trump. And we know that, unfortunately, with, as was said earlier, voting for the Green Party right now isn't really viable. Voting for, you know, libertarians isn't a viable thing, at least in the political spectrum we live in now at the federal level. So how do you go from just, I'm not going to vote for Trump, to, yes, I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton, or yes, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden? And to me, and I explain this to a lot of folks that are a little bit older than me, because I think this is also a generational thing too. And this is another reason why Bernie resonated with so many young people, which is I'm 33. I was old enough to understand what 9/11 was, what the Iraq War was, all that stuff. And it was the same politics of fear that some people, frankly, in the Democratic Party, they themselves dabble in. I'm not saying you do, I'm not saying Annabel does, but I'm saying there's an element of that to how a lot of Democrats, especially back in 2016, campaigned against Trump. All they said was, if you don't do this, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And I'm sorry, but we've been lied to several times by a lot of those same people. They told us we need to go into Iraq because they've had weapons of mass destruction on both the left and right sides of the spectrum. We know that wasn't true. And a lot of people, except for a few key people like Bernie Sanders, didn't even stop to question that. We were told that we needed to continue this war on terror for the last 20 years because these people outside of us wanted to attack us and do all these crazy things. We were told over and over that if we didn't do certain things, or we didn't just toe the line on certain issues, that these terrible things would happen to people. And so when we get lied to several times by the people we're supposed to trust because they're an authority, or they're older than us, or they're supposed to have more life experience to be able to inform us on our choices, but we see that they were either misinformed themselves, or worse, were lying, knowingly lying to us, this politics of only applying to people's fears rather than their hopes and dreams is not a great way to have someone want to vote for Joe Biden or want to vote for Hillary Clinton instead of just staying home. And as Jay said earlier, I think that's also another reason why we had a lot of folks that voted in 2008 and even a little bit in 2012 that just didn't vote at all in 2016. And that's also a reason why Donald Trump won. But to get back to why I'm hopeful that doesn't happen again is I think there have been some lessons learned from back then. You know, you had the coalition and joint policy committees that Bernie and Joe Biden stood up, which recently finished their work, and they're talking about actual issues that the Democratic Party stands for now to help hopefully bridge that divide. Joe Biden has moved on some things that Hillary never frankly did when she was running. So it's my hope that when mainline, Main Street Democrats, or even folks on the left that have been part of the movement for a long time, such as yourself, are talking to some of the disaffected Bernie voters and stuff like that, you not only latch on to the, hey, if you don't vote for if you vote for Trump X, Y, and Z, or if you don't vote for Joe Biden X, Y, and Z, but this is also what the Democratic Party wants to do if we do succeed this time and get keep the House, gain the Senate, and of course, kick out the orange dude in the White House. This is what we're going to be doing, as opposed to this is what will happen. This is what we're keeping from happening by getting him out of office.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Kenny said. I agree completely. And by the way, I absolutely do not want to, minimize the absolute importance of Barack Obama being elected. It was perhaps the most important paradigm change in modern American history. I absolutely don't want to underscore that. But to speak to what Kenny is saying, for poor and working class people, the image of him, I was on the front lines of Standing Rock with sniper rifles pointed at me. And I have friends of mine who got their eyes shot out, and he told them that he was going to help. He sat down with the youth, bought them hamburgers, went to Standing Rock. They ran 2,000 miles across. He said, just bring me a petition, make some noise. They did that. They ran with their petition. They ran on foot, the youth runners at Standing Rock, and he refused to meet them. And to me, that is a metaphor for the modern Democratic Party. And at the end of the day, the progressives, liberals will get out of bed for issues that they need to be inspired by vision. They have to have a reason to vote for something. Conservatives will vote against something. Like conservatives will be mobilized based on fear. Liberals and progressives historically will never get out the vote based on not Trump. It's just not a viable get out the vote mobilization tactic. And so my answer, both for the progressives and far leftists and for those who are supporters of Joe Biden, the solution all around is to organize and to mobilize. So if you are spending your energy, the time of your day, trying to vote shame people on social media, you are wasting your time. You should contact your party, you should contact the campaign, you should get involved, and you should phone bank, you should knock on doors, you should donate, find a local group, start an affinity group, mobilize voters, especially in battleground states. That is where you can most effectively apply your efforts. And over on the left, I'm one of the people, and it's mostly going to be a lot of the indigenous folk, a lot of the Black and brown folk who are in frontline communities who are paying the costs. And I would say to us who are progressives, if I have to power map who I want to organize against, there is not even a question that I would rather organize against Joe Biden. He's a terrible candidate. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's not pretend he's a good candidate. He's a terrible candidate. And what we can accomplish organizing, it's almost like the fate of humanity is, I'm not being hyperbolic by saying we don't have 4 years to F around when it comes to climate change. We just don't. The science, the house is on fire. And so I think that for me, my suggestion goes to both sides. And in both, whether you're a critic on one side or you're a critic on other, you better be backing it up by showing up and not just complaining online, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you about vote shaming and spending a lot of time online engaging in arguments or getting triggered. I agree that completely. And I agree also with Kenny that the fact that people didn't come vote, not that they voted for Trump, but people who didn't vote, 45% of the adults who did not vote. And what is going wrong? Why can't we get more than 55% of people in America to vote? And I think it has to do with these underlying problems that we've been talking about, and why people feel like it doesn't really matter because they're still not going to have drinking water. They're still going to be poor. The roads are still not going to get paved. I do completely agree that those are real issues. I do want to wrap up by kind of giving everyone a chance to maybe just raise your hand if you do want to say something, just like the last closing thought that you want to share before we depart, like what you want people kind of be thinking about after we get off. And I always start with that. I mean, I guess I would love for us to fight for democracy together. Instead of just fighting as so-called Democrats or as critics of Democrats, whatever. I mean, it's like, can we all just, as a people, just fight for our democracy? Because, whether it's climate change or healthcare, it's not going to change unless our democracy is working. The only other way to try to create change is it would be by violent means. And I don't know if we can have the stomach for that. I don't have the stomach for a violent revolution. Maybe some others might, but I don't. And so, democracy is the only thing that I can hang on to with some hope. And so can we just fight for democracy? Because I think that for this election, democracy is at stake. And I want us to fight for that together and do it like we're one community, one people, one movement fighting for this. instead of feeling so splintered as having different strategies or tactics, or I don't know whatever label we want. I want all of us to feel like we're pulling for our democracy together. Pam, I don't know who else wanted to speak, but I'm just going to call on you guys. Okay, Kenny, so this is your last word. Make it count.
Sure.
Oh gosh. Oh, go ahead, Kenny.
No, go Pam, by all means, you go first.
Okay. Gosh, now I don't know. Go ahead, Kenny. I'll think of what I was going to say.
Fair enough. Sorry about that. But yeah, no. So again, thank you, Annabelle, for putting us together. Pam, Jay, thank you for your contributions. And I hope everyone online feels like they can have these kinds of conversations with their friends, regardless of where they sit on the spectrum, because these are conversations that need to be had. Because there's something that Jay said on nearly the outside is that, especially with social media and how easy it is for algorithms and things to start to only send us things that confirm our existing biases, it becomes really easy to boil people down to caricatures and to judge people and what they're willing to do and not do and talk about, not what they don't talk about, based on a snippet or a soundbite or something they share online. And to get back to what Annabelle said, we can't have a robust conversation about saving our democracy and really promoting what our founding fathers wanted, which is the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of all of us having a strong free government that's powered by people and not oligarchy. Until we can break down those fundamental walls that is put up by how we communicate right now. I've had a lot of good conversations with conservatives. Just to go back a little bit, when I ran last year, one of the biggest things I ran on was education and funding our school system better. There are conservative Republicans who I disagree with on a lot of other issues that end up voting for me over my Republican incumbent opponent because that incumbent didn't really care about the school system based on her actions. Well, I did. And so it's all about finding those things. When we talk about organizing and really getting down into the nitty-gritty of mobilizing and connecting with people, we find those commonalities, those common human connections on issues and value sets where we're not so far as apart as our media would suggest we are. And as soon as we find those things, how can we then build that and leverage that to hold our elected officials accountable, how we hold our parties accountable, how when we get rid of Donald Trump, to your point, Annabelle, have a people's movement of now we've gotten rid of this constitutional crisis that is the Donald Trump presidency. Not only undo the harm that he's done, but put a foot forward so something like this doesn't happen again, because we actually have a real system of government that responds and resonates with people as opposed to just the biggest check writers. How do we come together outside as a movement and inside as elected officials and party bosses to really talk about what matters to most of all of us as Americans and put those conversations into action at the legislative level on not just frankly the federal level, but the states and local governments as well, like where I serve, because that's the only way one will make sure something like Donald Trump never happens again. But most importantly, we start building the kind of change that a lot of people have felt have not been heard for such a long time that are ready for disruptors. I mean, the whole reason why Bernie and Trump to me are so resonative with people is because they want to see disruptors that understand fundamentally that the system as it currently exists does not work for so many people. And it's only when we build that people power and acknowledge those things and come together that we're really going to have real democratic lowercase d change in our society.
Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, I could not agree with Kenny more. And at the end of the day, if people hear nothing else, it's the paradigm change from looking for someone else to save you to looking in the mirror, because this comes down to you are a leader. You have influence. You have 500, 1,000, 2,000 people that you can communicate with on your platform. And in my view, it really is about joining an existing group. Got to get off the keyboard and into the world. That's where it is. So, the paradigm shift must be from, I'm just my tactic, in my opinion, the tactic is important, because if you are someone who does believe that Trump must be removed and Biden must be supported, my recommendation is empathy, challenge your own biases, and consider how that person feels. Also consider your own class privilege, or we have racial privilege and we have class privilege, and both must be considered. I have privileges, I know that, and at the same time I have been a poor person most of my life, and we must consider both equally, not just class reductionism, not just liberal identity politics, but we must consider both. Have an empathy for that person, and if you do believe that, my opinion, my suggestion to you lovingly is to, they care about policies, like far leftists, progressives, they care about the policies like Medicare for all, like a Green New Deal, that are going to make people's lives better. 65,000 people die every year because even under the ACA. And so my suggestion is to do the best you can to create solidarity for them, that you will stand with them to push them on those policies, and not just vote shame them and saying, oh, but Trump, oh, but Trump, oh, but Trump.
Right.
It's not going to work, in my opinion. And for the people on my left, I would invite you to consider that as an organizer, if you're not in the trenches, if you're not on the front lines, consider that privilege as well. And I would invite you to join those who are on the front lines, the indigenous communities, the Black and brown communities that are leading that charge, because it is their bodies that are on the line. And consider that a Donald Trump presidency is a clear and present danger to the survival of humanity.
Can I
Pam,
say?
yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Annabelle, for this opportunity. It's really healing, even to have these discussions for me. Oh God, I had so much to say, but one main thing is I'm no lover of Joe Biden. He was probably my least favorite candidate. I like Elizabeth Warren. Because we're looking at what choices we had. I think Elizabeth Warren was my favorite. But hey, he won. I don't know. I guess everybody flocked around him at the end. But the main point was, like, we living under this system. So no matter who, even if it was the most wonderful leftist leader, and we got them in some way, or some person that believed everything we believe. And I've done this county level. I've gotten somebody in who spoke exactly my language. He can't do anything because he's a minority on our county level. So even though he has the best intentions, he's working inside the system. So we got to remember that. Be pragmatic. Once you get in there, you're still working inside the system. There's only so much you can do. That's honesty, and the other thing is Trump, he just opened up some sacred lands, and I don't want to name it. I can't remember exactly where it was, but probably like 80% of the sacred lands he opened up to exploration very recently. So he's doing like big backward things like that. But the big piece for me is, like, we have to understand that there's a broad, vast number of people out there that would kill us rather than let us get away with what we want. You understand what I'm saying? I'm an electrician, I'm a musician, so I'm a gig worker. I'm not bourgeois. I'm not like privileged in that sense. And but I understand, like, these people, like, I've had guy electrician friends, and they were like, no, I understand totally what you're saying, but I would kill Hillary before I vote for her. That's where they're thinking. So I'm like, what the hell are we going to do with all those people? How are we going to rule those people, if we get in Bernie or whoever, or, somebody like that, that you're really, really loving on. And so, you got to be pragmatic too, because people's lives are at stake. And if I'm not, and I don't live through the revolution, then what good was it for me to go, all in for my ideal? It's an ugly thing to admit, but that's kind of where what I'm feeling right now.
Right.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah. So I just want to emphasize that I think for Pam and many other people who have expressed this point of view to me, I think they just want to feel like the Bernie or bust movement or the people in that movement or who feel predisposed to not voting for Biden, like that they actually care about like the immediate and urgent needs that people have, you know, that they feel like their lives are on the line and that they just want that to be recognized, that this isn't theoretical, this isn't abstract, this isn't intellectual, like this is a life and death matter. You know, if Trump is reelected, people are going to die, people are going to suffer. So you know, so aside from all the intellectual arguments, just we need to recognize that people are hurting and scared, and that we like that voice has to be heard. Cynthia, did you want to say something? You want to unmute yourself? Okay.
I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about even before we started was thinking about the people that you're talking about that aren't going to vote for Biden and having empathy for them. And I think that, you know, that some people are just so disillusioned with what's going on in politics right now. But I think also that they're working in their own ways and like grassroots things to try to make change. But I kind of wonder, and I suppose I should ask them like what they're thinking to make the big changes happen if they're not going to participate in the system, you know. But I was also going to say one of the things I've been thinking about is it seems like COVID-19 is opening up all this space for people to think and talk, and like this big emptiness where we just have to like, I don't know, sort of contract and expand. And I think somebody mentioned paradigm. I think we're getting ready for some big changes because some room has been opened up to make that happen. And people are on the front lines where they feel like they really have to be to make those changes. You know, I think something is going to change. I have hope more than despair, really.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys, all of you guys, for having this conversation. There's a thread on the live stream on Talk on Main Street if you want to put more links in and maybe share how we can get in touch with you guys, especially Jay and Kenny. If you want to put in your contact information, if people want to organize with you, please do that. But thank you all. I really think these conversations are necessary, and it was very healing. So thanks, especially to Jay for taking the time to give us an overview.
Thank you for everybody, and thank you to Kenny for your great work and Pam for being in the trenches for decades.
Yes.
So all we can do is keep carrying that torch.
Thank you so much, Kenny and Cynthia. Love to everyone in Owensboro, Kentucky. And Pam, big hug to you. Talk to you soon. Okay. Bye, everyone. Okay. All right.
Bye.
Bye, Pam. Bye, Kenny. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing more conversations like this. So please feel free to join the Zoom calls if you want to participate in the conversation. I do want to kind of create a space where it feels very inclusive, that people can join, and you don't have to be somehow an expert or whatever. You can just speak as part of We the People. So I do want to keep this very, informal and inclusive. But thank you all for joining, and let me know if there's a topic that you would like for us to take on. The thing that I would like to figure out how to do is talk to maybe some of the Never Trump Republicans and see how we can organize with them. Can we organize with them? Is it a good idea? So that's kind of, I think, the next topic I would like to try to take on. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Okay, bye.